Hello, everybody. The podcast I want to do today from Buckets of Love is about space, the space bucket. And we all have different needs for space. When we first meet and we're so in love and it's so exciting, there isn't much space, is there? There's hardly any space to go home and do the washing and see our friends. But as we go closer and deeper into the relationship, it settles to some degree, and we might need to look at really the idea that we all need space. We need personal space, and then we need relationship space. The problem comes in relationships when we have different space needs. And I think once you start looking at this, you'll be able to see how you are with your partner. I was married to somebody who was a single child, and they lived a lot of their life on their own, and they actually had a really big need for personal space. If they didn't have personal space, they didn't feel so balanced. I came from a bigger family, living with lots of people, and I had a very social early life, so my space needs were quite different. I needed some space, but not as much as my partner. It took me a while when we first were together to realise that he wasn't rejecting me or not wanting to be with me. He just needed to recharge, and that's where you have to understand that when people go into their little personal space place, they're recharging and they're thinking and they're mulling things over, and they need that time. We also need that time to get our personal things done. In my other videos where I talked about the 4 relationships we have within the one, and that's on this channel, I spoke about the fact that we need to have time on our own to pursue our own goals, to do the things we need to do everything that we set out to do for our work or for our personal pleasure. Try not to see your space differences as a problem that can't be fixed. I just think you need to work around it a lot more. Therefore, if your partner needs a lot of space and you're left alone a bit, you need to then fill that up, because there is a difference between being independent and dependent. And if you can get both of those operating in your relationship, that's going to really work for you. The same goes for the fact if you need more personal space, you need to be honest with your partner. You need to say to them, look, I need to be on my own sometimes. I need to go and see my friends, do my thing, meditate, go for a walk on my own. It's not because I don't want to be with you. I just need this personal time to recharge. It's the way you talk to people about it that makes the difference. Some people can be very needy if we've come out of difficult early childhoods. Perhaps we are codependent and needy. You might want to have a look at that. I had to look at that for myself. Now I'm not so much like that, having done work on myself, but you might find you're still struggling with that, and there's some really great books out there on codependency. The way to work it is to negotiate and to compromise. That's how you can fix this bucket. What we used to do was say, so what are you doing today? And I'd say what I needed to do, and then the other person would say what they needed to do, and then we'd say, okay, do you want to meet at 3? Do you want to catch around 3? We'll have coffee, go out for coffee and gelati, or do you want to catch up at another time at lunch? Do you want to have lunch together? And even though we were still in the same actual house sometimes, we would actually do that on a daily basis so that the one person can go off and do their thing, the other person does their thing, and then we come together and we do the partner thing. We do the relationship thing, and that way we fill up the bucket. It can be a lonely feeling if you live with someone who needs a great amount of space to do work or to pursue their own hobbies. It can actually be quite isolating, and I want you to understand that. You might need to really speak to them about this, and they might need to make some concession with you, because we are living with them because we want to live with them, so we actually want to spend time with them. There is also another distance which is created by people having to go away for work, which creates space, and sometimes there's space created because the other person works from home or has a lot of things to do. For example, if you're the one who's doing most of the housework, you might not have time to have as much space with your partner because you've just got so much housework to do. So you compromise and ask them to help you, and or split it up and have a break in between. The space need can make big problems in the relationship buckets, I feel, because when we have vastly different space needs, it creates like a division between us. And that's the thing you really need to look at. When we're first together, we're usually very together and we're sitting close and we're touching each other and we're in the same room. However, I notice as people's relationships progress and go along years and years, that they start to separate physically. And I think this is a really big sign for you. If you're not sitting in the same room watching TV or doing things, if you're not sitting on the same couch anymore, if you're not spending any physical time together really, you might find that the bucket's getting a little unnourished and it's getting a little empty, and you might need to shore that up. I found that it's a good idea sometimes to leave the house, to go and have a coffee, go out for dinner, go for a walk. There's less distraction. You can be more focused on one another, and the person and you can talk or enjoy that time together because you're in the same space and you don't have any calls on your attention like housework or if you work from home or children. It's important that you realize that this physical distance is a huge sign. I've watched people over the years, and when they were first together, they were sitting next to each other on the couch and doing things together and apart, of course. And then I watch them 10 years later and they don't even sit next to each other. If they go to an event, they never spend any time together. They just split as soon as they get there. They often come in separate cars even and go home at differing times. And that's something you might want to watch out for. Their bedtime is also an interesting one. If you've got some people like to go to bed at the same time, some people go at very different times, and you might need to make up that difference. For example, if your partner goes to bed at 9 and you want to go to bed at 11:30, you might find that sometimes you should both go to bed at the same time, just to have a little bit of break in the distance. The distance and the space are things that, one, indicate where your relationship is, particularly if it starts changing. It's different if it's consensual and you both agreed to it and you're both really happy with it. But when one person's sort of fading into the distance and you don't really want that much, then you really need to stop and talk about it and adjust. It might be as simple as sitting on the couch together or watching a program together, going for a walk together instead of going separately. It can be quite simple to bring you back together, to feel the love and to be nourished. It is an act of love to give a person space and to give them distance when they need it. And sometimes people need it because they take a while to sort things out in their head, or they just want to finish something that they're really keen on. It doesn't mean they don't love you. Space and distance don't necessarily indicate the depth of love, but they can later in the relationship indicate a change in the relationship, and that's what I want you to be looking at and to be mindful of, and then to fix it. And it is pretty easy to fix. I think that you will start looking at this bucket. I think this bucket is very important. You will notice also in your other relationships with other people how much space you're giving them and how much distance there is, because some relationships can really weather it and others not so much. You'll know which ones they are. The whole thing is that we chose to be with this person, to spend our lives with them, so we must make sure that we do that in the best way that we can to show them that we do love them. And it's interesting, someone once said, what is the 4-letter word that most people need? Of course, I thought love, which is true, and the person answered time. And I thought to myself, that's actually really true, because when we give people time and we're with them and we're focused, that's probably the most beautiful healing that we can do for anyone. And the most beautiful way that we can show our love for someone is to give them time. Go and have a look at this one and maybe talk to your partner and make some adjustments if you're starting to separate too much before you really get into trouble. I'm hoping this podcast helped you. I found this really interesting in my relationship because we were quite different, so both of us had to make kind of an adjustment and meet in the middle, but we made it work. Okay, so I'm sending you lots of love for this. Goodbye.